So welcome everyone. This is a collaboration between the National Wildlife Federation's Eco Schools US and Sharks for Kids. We are very excited to have our guests today talk to you all about sharks. I am Jennifer Hammonds. I'm the Director of Education at the National Wildlife Federation. I've been with the Federation for 15 years, and before that, I was a science teacher for 15 years. So I'm super excited that you're here today. Sharks are my passion, along with the ocean and habitats and ecosystems and just all that wonderful stuff. So want to pass it over to our guest, Sarah, to introduce herself and to get us into this introduction on sharks.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Just quickly share my screen so we can get the PowerPoint going. So, my name is Sarah, as Jennifer mentioned, and we're going to be investigating sharks today with Sharks for Kids. But before I start talking about sharks, I am going to talk about myself for just a moment. So I am a marine biologist, and I'm currently working on my PhD at Florida International University, where I do study sharks and what sort of factors might affect their behavior and their decision making. I partner really closely with Rookery Bay over on the west coast of Florida. I am sponsored by NOAA, the National Oceanographic Atmospheric Administration, that helps support my research. And I've had the privilege to get to share my knowledge about sharks and my research with students like yourself, and I'm very excited to do that today. So first, I just want to show you guys this video. This is when people think shark, they often think of this iconic individual right here, the white shark. This is what people think of when they think of a big, bad shark. So sharks are actually over 400 million years old, which makes them older than dinosaurs and older than trees, which is absolutely crazy. They are very, very good at what they do. They are efficient predators, and that is part of why a shark of some form has always continued to exist up until today's time frame. There's over 500 different species of sharks. I showed you that white shark at the beginning, but sharks are much more diverse than what we think of when we think of a sharky shark. And today I'm going to go a little bit more into what exactly is a shark, what makes sharks unique, and the diversity that we see among such species worldwide. Already here on this screen, you can see a lot of different shapes, a lot of different colors. It's harder to tell the size from photos, but we have sharks that are in this photo that are over 15 feet long, and we have species of sharks that are under 4 feet in size. And all of these sharks are playing an important role in the ecosystem. Another thing I'm going to chat about today. With those 500 different species, this means that these sharks are not all found in the same area. There's lots of different habitats that we can find sharks in. Generally, the joke is if the water is salty, there's a shark. Now, there are some species of sharks that actually do swim in fresh water. So I always like to say more, if the water connects to the ocean, there could be a shark in there. And that means that there's a lot of different habitats we can find shark species. We have these beautiful lush seagrass meadows, seagrass beds that sharks will forage in, they'll swim through. We have mangrove habitats, which are important coastal ecosystems, and mangroves function as a nursery habitat for many shark species, but also foraging habitat for some of the adult or larger juveniles. A lot of the research I do is through mangrove habitats on the west coast of Florida, and I've caught sharks that are only about 1.5 feet long, and I've also caught sharks that are about 13 feet long in these mangrove systems. So we get a wide diversity of individuals that use those habitats. We have the classic coral reef, but we also have sharks that specialize on open ocean and will forage on what they can and will find. And then there are some sharks that are what we call bottom dwellers or demersal. So we have some sharks that like to hang out at the bottom of the ocean. This can be in sandy habitats, this can be in like rocky bottom habitats or in coral reefs. So what is a shark exactly? A shark is a fish. They are a cartilaginous fish. So when we think of a fish that you might have had for dinner, or if you go to the grocery store, like a snapper, a grouper, monkey, salmon, those are all bony fish. So their skeleton is made out of bones, just like ours is. Sharks, on the other hand, have their skeleton is made up of cartilage. So if you were to bend your nose or wiggle your ears, those are the parts of our body that are made of cartilage. Shark's entire skeleton is made up of that. This is actually beneficial for a shark because it actually makes them less heavy. And so this helps when they are trying to retain their buoyancy in the water. It makes it a little bit less weight for them to lug around. Sharks' taxonomy, they are part of the animal kingdom. They are chordates, which means that they do have a spinal cord. We are also chordates. And this is where we start to split from them. They are chondrichthyes of their class. Their subclass is elasmobranchs. They share that with stingrays. So if you've ever heard of Flat Shark Friday or referring to stingrays as flat shark, that's because they're both elasmobranchs and they're actually very closely related on that taxonomic tree web. And then if we go into the actual species, this is where things start to split up. We can have different orders, different families here with the great hammerhead shark. We go down to the Sphernidae family, which is for all hammerheads. Same with the genus Spherna, and then the actual specific species name. So the great hammerhead's name is Spherna macarin. So we have what's called a scientific name, which is the name that is accepted by all scientists worldwide. It's usually Latin or Greek in origin, and it's made up of the genus and the species name together. So Spherna macarin is the scientific name of the great hammerhead. And then we have the common name, what everyone knows it as, great hammerhead in English. In other places of the world, they will use their own language to give it its own common name. But that's why we have the scientific name, to make sure that it's standardized globally, even with maybe changes in dialect, language, time. So we talked about the sharks a bit, but I want to highlight some differences outside of just the skeletal differences. So here on my right, if you're looking at the screen, you see the classic fish scale. And on the left, it kind of looks more just smooth, boring brown. Sharks don't have scales in what we think of when we think of fish scales. What their skin is actually made up of is called dermal denticles, which if you look under a microscope, their skin is made up of these tiny little pieces. And dermal denticles actually comes from the name dermal, skin, denticles, teeth. So it's almost like teeth skin. And if you look at it under a microscope, you can see why. They look like little tiny teeth that are overlaying each other. So if you were to cut a shark, it feels rough like sandpaper. And what's even cooler about sharks is that different species, their dermal denticles look different. Here we have already 4 different shark species. We have the chain cat shark, the mako shark, and the leopard shark, or beagle shark. And their dermal denticles, they're all different shapes. The shapes of those denticles, again, goes into where and what these different sharks are doing. For the mako shark, some of you guys might know the mako shark is the fastest shark. And their dermal denticles are really well designed to actually help them with speed. Some of you guys might have known, Olympic swimmers, their swimsuit, if you look at it under a microscope, they have designed a lot of those swimsuits to mimic a shark dermal denticles. And they found that it can sometimes help them with being faster. So, I mean, it sounds like they're just trying to be as fast as a shark, in my opinion, but evolution has done a really good job at making them efficient at what they do. If you look at it even more in this video, we can see the actual 3D shape of the dermal denticles and how they fit together like a puzzle to create that entire piece of skin that the shark has. Then let's go into what we look at when we're looking at sharks. So we have male sharks and we have female sharks. And with some species of fish, you can't tell the difference without doing a dissection or doing some internal work or discoloration. Sharks are easier. You can easily identify if they're male or female from external appendages. So sharks have what's called a cloaca. That's where they pee, poop, and reproduce out of. For male sharks, right outside the opening of the cloaca, they have what are called claspers. And you can see them here on the left. If the shark has claspers, that means they are male. But if the shark doesn't have claspers, like on the right, and you can only see the opening for the cloaca, that means they're a female. That cloaca opening is between their 2 pelvic fins. So talking about that, let's go into reproduction. Sharks are cool because just like everything else about sharks, they don't just have a set forward straight answer. Some sharks lay eggs. Some of you guys might have heard of mermaid pouches. That's what we see here on the top, in which they lay the egg, the shark develops, and then they hatch out and immediately start living the world as a shark. Some sharks have the eggs that are shaped almost corkscrew-like, what you see here at the bottom, and they'll actually wedge it in between rocks. And then the shark will come out and hatch as a mini version of the adult, ready to take on the world. But there are other sharks. Oh yeah, and you can see here in this video, in the middle mermaid pouch, you can see the shark moving in the mermaid pouch, getting ready to hatch. But then there are some sharks that do very similar to what we as mammals do, is that they do internal growth. So some sharks, like bull sharks, they will actually carry the juveniles in their abdomen the entire time, and then they will pup, and the baby sharks will come out of their cloaca, and they are ready to take on the world already as a mini version of their mom. When they are first born, they have this tiny little scar that you can see right between those pectoral fins, which are those front fins up near their head. And that scar is essentially the same thing as our umbilical or belly button. It's an umbilical scar. It's where they were connected to the mother when they were inside the abdomen. And when they're very young, that is still open. As they get older, it'll close and heal over. And then when they become much older, it actually can completely fade and you don't even notice it anymore. So the presence or absence of that can help us identify how old or young the shark is. If it's still open, we call it a neonate, which means that it's just freshly born. Versus if in this case, like it's healed, but you can see it, I would call it a young of year shark. It's less than a year old, but it's not freshly born either. Then we have those larger individuals where we know it's a juvenile, but that umbilical scar is healed over, and that's how we know, okay, it's just a juvenile. Um, and it's not under a year old. So going into sharks, just like other fish, they do have gills. But again, depending on the species, the number of those gills can change. We have some sharks that have 5 gills. We have sharks that are referred to as like 6 gill sharks. They have 6. And then we even have some sharks that have 7 gills. Gills are what they use to breathe underwater. We have our lungs, so we breathe in and out. Sharks, what they do is they open their mouth and they swallow water and pump that water over their gills. The gills will then take oxygen out of the water and transport it through their body. But with breathing, that can also depend based on the species. So yes, they have their gills, but how they get water over those gills varies. So what we have here in this video is rim ventilation. And this is the classic. You ever heard of the fact that a shark can't stop swimming? They're always swimming. This is common for most shark species in that they need to actively move forward in order to get water to flow over their gills in order to keep breathing. So it's the equivalent of if you have to breathe, you have to keep walking around. Like in order to keep your lungs working, you just have to keep walking. That sounds tiring. I'm very glad we don't have to do that. There are some sharks that do what we can do, which is they can force the water over their gills, or in our case, sit still and actually breathe in and out of our lungs. And that's called buccal pumping. And what they do is they are able to forcibly force water over their gills, kind of with a pumping motion, and they're able to actually hang out on the bottom. One of the most commonly known sharks that does this is nurse sharks. Other sharks, such as carpet sharks, or like the funny wobbegong sharks down in Australia, do that. Lemon sharks can do this. Not that they necessarily always want to. They like to swim a lot too, but they can sit at the bottom if they want to and just force the water over their gills. These are the chill sharks, and the way they designed to do this depends a lot on how they prey upon their species. The sharks that hang out at the bottom and maybe wait for prey to come to them, they have developed buccal pumping. Versus if I was a shark that has to actively hunt and chase the fish I want to eat, there's no reason for me to have developed buccal pumping. I'm going to probably be a ram-bound centilator because I'm already moving anyway. I'm already constantly moving. There's no point in me wasting energy over evolutionary time to develop buccal pumping. So here's a video of a lemon shark hanging out at the bottom and buccal pumping. You can see it opening its mouth and you see that water flowing over the gills. And then we get into those beautiful things that sharks are really well known for, which is their shiny teeth. And already here, 4 different shark species, we see that these teeth in their mouths look very different. And I'm going to get into that a little bit more. Each of those sharks eat very different things. So let's go back to the teeth real quick. Let's look at the top left, the conch. Top left shark, you see how much smaller their teeth are. Their teeth are more designed for crushing. They want to get into that conch shell or sucking out. Now let's look at the shark teeth to the right. Very pointy, very razor sharp. Yellowfin tuna. They need pointy, sharp teeth so they can grab that tuna. This is a cookie cutter shark. And so what they do is they actually bite a hole and maybe see kind of with their teeth do a cookie cutter motion. They'll get a section of the meat. And cookie cutter sharks will go on animals that are way bigger than them, take a quick little bite, and leave that perfectly shaped hole and then leave. Then if we go to the shark teeth right here on the left, you see those nice big kind of curved triangle teeth. I believe that's a tiger shark tooth, if I'm not mistaken. Their teeth are really well designed for getting into green sea turtles, and so on and so forth. You can learn a lot about what a shark is feeding on and doing based off of their teeth shape and their mouth size and mouth shape. Some sharks can actually kind of protrude their jaw if they're trying to bite something. So here we have a lemon shark that is doing exactly that. And you can see the different stages of it as it extends its jaw out to here is just yawning, but they'll do that even when they're actively biting to kind of give them a little extra movement forward. And here I'm talking about, again, those teeth shapes. All those pointy triangular ones, they're really good at getting fish, squid. Ones that have serrated edges are great for eating marine mammals or sea turtles, things that they need to maybe cut through. Some of those smaller teeth that have those weirder shapes, they're really good at plating over each other, and they use them as almost a crushing motion. They can really crush and get into crab shells or lobster shells. And there's more. We talked about there's 500 different species of sharks. Each shark species has a unique tooth shape, which is great. And it depends, is the tooth the top tooth or the bottom tooth? Even with humans, we have molars, we have our canines. Similar thing with sharks. Now, what's really cool about sharks is they explore the world with their mouths and they do use their teeth to do so. So, what happens if they lose a tooth? Do they not have that tooth forever? Thankfully, that is not the case. Sharks have actually developed multiple rows of teeth and they will continue to replace those teeth forever, which is very cool. It makes it very nice because they don't ever have to go to the dentist. They never need to replace a tooth if something happens. Here we have an example of a model where you can actually see the teeth as they come out and they fall out and a new row will come in and replace it. This is part of the reason why these are the most common fossil or part of a shark that we find. One, because they're constantly losing them, and so they have a lot of them and they're constantly replacing them, and so you can find them a lot. And also because they are not made of, unlike the rest of their skeleton, they're not made of cartilage. They are part of them, so they actually fossilize a lot better. Now let's talk about the fins of a shark. I've mentioned a few of those names. I talked about pelvic fins, I talked about pectoral fins. So let's do those two first. Fins number 6, those are their pectoral fins. Kind of like us, our pectoral muscle is here in our chest area. Sharks, same thing. Their pectoral fins is those front fins at number 6. Number 5 is those pelvic fins I was talking about. Again, think about our own body. Our pelvic bone is right here with our hips. Kind of the same thing with the shark. Number 5 is their pelvic fin. Then number 4 is their anal fin. They only have one anal fin. It's just past the pelvic fin, but before their tail. Their tail, number 3, is officially called their caudal fin, and they can have an upper and lower lobe of their caudal fin. Numbers 1 and 2 are their dorsal fins. They have their first dorsal and their second dorsal. One of the best ways we can tell sharks apart, especially ones that look similar, is the size of fins, the shape of their fins, and the location of their fins compared to the rest of their body. So for example, lemon sharks, their second dorsal is almost as big, if not the same size as their first dorsal, versus a white shark like we see here, their second dorsal is not big at all compared to their first dorsal. You wouldn't even notice that you're so distracted by that beautiful large first dorsal fin. Now let's talk about some of those shark senses. So we have 5 senses that we use. We have taste, touch, smell, sight, and hearing. Sharks have all of those senses. And then they have some superpowers as well. So we talked about their smell. Here is the shark nostril. They do smell. They actually have a very good sense of smell. They can hear. They don't have external ears like we do, but they do have a small opening in which they can hear things in the water column. They have sight. Some sharks rely on their visual cues a lot more than others. A lot of that is based off of habitat, based off of what type of prey they are feeding on. And then they have taste and touch, just like we do. And depending on where or what the shark is doing, especially if they're looking to hunt, they might depend on different senses at different points in time. So for hearing, they can hear very far. Sound also travels very far in water. So a shark might hear a sound and they'll start moving towards it. They might hear the sound of splashing, animal distress, maybe the sound of other sharks feeding, and they will start moving towards it. As they get closer, the shark can then start to smell, and that can better pinpoint what direction they need to go in, or also give them more context about what are they actually moving towards. Then within 100 meters, sharks, similar to other fish, they have the ability to actually feel pressure vibrations in the water. If you've ever been in the pool or in the lake or even in the tub, and if you move water with your hand, and let's say you move water towards your leg, you can feel the water push against your leg, just like the waves feeling against you. Fish are very sensitive to that, and they can actually feel sometimes those vibrations and the water pushing at a much less forceful amount than maybe we can. And it can really give them an idea of things are moving towards them, if it's moving away from them, that sort of thing. That's why if you've ever been at the beach or lake and you try to catch a fish with your bare hands and they swim away, because they actually felt the water moving, they knew what direction your hand was coming from before you even tried. Then sharks will use their vision. And then they have some extra senses, including like electrical reception, which I'm going to get into a little bit more. And that's really useful when they get to that closer range with prey or any other thing that they might try to encounter with. And then once they're actually making contact with, let's say, the food source, that's when taste, touch, temperature, direct contact really plays a role in the senses that the shark is experiencing. So talking about hearing and sound, as I mentioned, sound travels underwater 4 times faster than on land. Many animals really use sound when they are trying to pinpoint prey or even just other individuals. Dolphins and whales, I think, are a classic example because we hear about dolphin sound and whale sounds. Sharks don't necessarily vocalize the same way, but they still use sound to help them find the prey. Some species can use this to go really, really far and like listen from very far distances. And that's because injured fish and prey will actually give off specific sounds, and that can really help the shark figure out what they are moving towards. Oh, there you go. Now I'm gonna play this video and I want you guys to really look at the shark and see if you see anything noticeable. We're gonna have a couple different species come up. So looking there in that snout, you might notice little tiny holes that kind of look like freckles. So here comes a great hammerhead. Let's pay attention again. All those little tiny pinpricks that are surrounding their mouth and their face area. So that first shark with the tiger shark, here it is again. Take a look and see those tiny holes and how it comes, bumps, and moves away. So these animals are not just actually, they're using those tiny holes as an additional sense. So here, take one more look. You can get a nice close up of those. They're almost like little freckles, but they're not. What they are is they are ampullae of Lorenzini. These are tiny pores in their skin that surround their facial and mouth area of the shark. And what these views do is they detect electrical fields. So every living thing emits electrical fields. That's just because we're constantly burning energy in every single cell. Muscle contractions give off electrical fields. Our heart gives off electrical fields. If you've ever heard of an EKG, measuring heart attacks, that's what they're doing. They're using electrical fields to measure the muscle contractions of your heart. Sharks don't need a fancy machine to do that. Their ampullae of Lorenzini can actually help them detect electrical fields themselves. Sharks can also detect magnetic fields in the same way, which can really help them with navigation. Many sharks will navigate across very large distances, and it is thought that some of the species might be using magnetic fields in order to really orient themselves in the ocean. As they also use these with temperature gradients. The voltage difference between their skin and the base of the cell is what they really are detecting, and they're able to figure out, oh, am I near something that's giving off an electrical field or not? So sometimes when a shark is figuring out if something is food or figuring out if something is eating live, that's when they'll come and they'll do what we saw in the video with the thumb, where they're getting this antivirus close to whatever they're looking at. This might be why you see some of those viral videos of sharks checking out boat engines. It's because it's giving off an electrical field and the shark is confused. It's trying to figure out what is going on. Like, what is this? And here is a really close-up image. As you can see, there's a break in the dermal denticles, and you see the individual nerves and pores of the ampullae Lorenzini that is found around their mouth area. Then I mentioned there are other super sensitive, the lateral line. Other fish also have this, and it's an opening of pores along the sides of their body that can feel the water movement and actually feel that change in the water pressure essentially against their body. So if you are trying to catch a fish, it moves before it even sees your hand. It's because they literally feel the water that your hand is moving. Sharks can do the same thing. This is how sometimes you'll see the animals swimming and they know to just turn and avoid something, or it can let them know like, oh, something's swimming past me. I'm gonna go and check it out. And then sharks have different, I wouldn't necessarily say their senses, but they have behaviors that can really improve their ability to survive because, as we mentioned, they're over 400 million years old. They're very good at surviving as a species. They have structural changes in which they will use structure and also behavioral, where they'll hang out. Lemon shark pups will actually school and hang out together to, one, help find food and also maybe avoid larger sharks from eating them. Different sharks have different physiological needs. Some sharks like to spend their time in colder waters. Other sharks prefer to spend their time in warm waters. Bull sharks can actually swim into fresh water. So bull shark pups will actually spend a lot of their early years in freshwater ecosystems, like very far up in the Everglades or in lagoons and estuaries, because they don't have to compete with other baby sharks if they're in there. The other sharks can't tolerate fresh water, so they'll go there, hang out, and they don't have to worry about fighting off a lemon shark to get food. And they don't have to worry about large sharks of different species potentially coming in and trying to eat them, which is very cool. And all these different physiological differences is what makes different species unique and also allows them to succeed in their own unique habitat. Mega sharks have super speed. They can reach speeds of 45 miles per hour, which is very fast. Uh, and thinking that they can hit that burst. And it makes sense because even looking at those teeth, you see how sharp and pointy they are. Mako sharks go after fish that are fast and slippery. So they need to have that super speed to catch up and grab onto them. And their teeth are designed to really get a hold of those fish that are moving quickly and might be slippery. We have some sharks that glow in the dark, super glow. A lot of these sharks are bottom dwelling sharks that use that light to attract prey. We're still studying a lot about sharks. And the actual reason for a lot of bioluminescence is something we're still figuring out, even just in general deep sea research. Some people think it might be related to reproduction, but it might be related to finding mates. It might be related to attracting prey who can see those color things. It's all really cool. But yes, we do have sharks that glow, which is pretty neat. And here's a, hope this video plays. No, it might not be, but you guys can see the glowing shark on the reef, which is very cool. We have some sharks that super camouflage. We have one shark in each of these videos. Of the top one, these are all different types of carpet, bottom dwelling sharks. Some sharks are designed to hang out in the sand, like the one on the top left. Cat shark, if they wanted to just cover its fins a little bit in the sand, you wouldn't see it. And if you were a fish swimming by, it would explode out and grab you. And then we have some sharks that have over evolutionary time are more well suited to hiding on a coral reef, like our top right and our bottom left sharks, where not only is their color pattern very matching of the reef, but actually around their mouth area, if you look really closely, you can see these almost tassels that are like whiskers almost. They're not whiskers, but they're like excursions around their mouth area. And it mimics the shape of coral reefs. And the whole goal is to see if fish will even come and swim in there and check it out and go grab their food. And in the bottom right, we see another shark that is hanging out, and their pattern really matches with the breaking up of the sand and the shells. And that shark is also probably just sitting there waiting for prey to come by, or it's sitting there waiting for a predator to swim away if it doesn't see it. Oh, let's see this video. This is that shark I was talking about that'll hang out in the sand. So if that shark wasn't moving and you were just swimming past, you wouldn't even see it. Keep an eye out. There you go. See? Exactly. So the difference in these different superpowers of the shark from the mako shark that doesn't camouflage but a very fast swimmer to catch fast fish to these carpet sharks that are not necessarily the fastest, but they are really good at camouflaging and waiting for prey to come to them, makes each of these sharks really good in their own respective habitats and ecosystem. We have some sharks, and again, we're going to go back to that iconic white shark. They're super breached. So one fun fact about white sharks is that their teeth shape, as I mentioned, changes as they get older. The juvenile white sharks have a very different tooth shape than adult white sharks. And that changes because it changes on what they're actually feeding on. Juvenile white sharks will more likely feed on other fish rather than marine mammals. And as they age, that tooth shape changes from maybe more triangular and pointy to having those serrated edges and being wider, which is really, really efficient for cutting into the blubber of marine mammals. And that's when you start seeing those white sharks that'll do that really iconic breach where they swim from deep depths and burst out of the water to grab a seal that is swimming at the surface. We're gonna watch one of those. So that was not a real seal. That was a tow line that is shaped like a seal to try to attract and get an iconic video like that. But that is how white sharks will hunt for seals that are hanging out at the surface. They'll hang out to depths and then they'll swim straight up and burst out of the water. We've talked a lot about sharks and what makes sharks cool in of themselves just by being a shark. But I'm going to talk a little bit about what makes sharks important for the marine ecosystem. So I think most of us here have heard of a food web or a food chain. This is a very simplified version of that. As we know, lots of animals eat lots of different things. Things are really much more interconnected than what we see here. But this is a great visual to just really understand it more on a step-by-step basis. So everything is connected. We have the bottom of our food web and food chain, which is our photosynthesizers, where they take energy from the sun, they incorporate it into their own bodies. Then we have one step above that will eat those photosynthesizers. We call those our primary consumers. Then something a little bit bigger than those, our smaller fish, will be those primary consumers. We call those secondary consumers. And we go on. We can add as many layers as we want. We can get tertiary, quaternary, quaternary, so many numbers right there. And so with all of this interconnectedness, if you take one piece out of the food chain, it'll actually completely dysregulate the system. So for example, if we remove large sharks from the equation, our tuna here in this food web is going to skyrocket in numbers because nothing's keeping the tuna that numbers in check. So if there's a lot of tuna, they're going to eat all the mackerel. And so we're going to lose a lot of mackerel. And if there's not enough mackerel, then our small fish numbers are going to skyrocket like crazy. And if there's a lot of small fish, they're going to eat all the shrimp-like creatures. And if there's no more shrimp-like creatures, we're actually going to get a huge boom in our photosynthesizers, which can actually lead to taking them too much oxygen out of the food web, which can cause a lot of animals to actually die. That's when we have like sometimes red tide. That's the same thing. The algae is like taking a lot of the oxygen out. It can be a whole cycle. And this is just with large sharks. We have some sharks that are medium sharks and small sharks that are more similar in the food web role as the tuna. And if we take those out of the ecosystem, we can actually have a situation in which our shrimp-like creatures are overpopulating and will actually eat all of our photosynthesizers. So each part of this food web is critical for ensuring the balance of it all. I like to think of it as a Jenga tower. If you take enough pieces out, it's going to collapse. And it doesn't matter if you take it from the top, the middle, or the bottom. You start taking pieces out of the Jenga tower, it's going to affect the whole thing until it does fall over and does collapse. And as I mentioned, sharks aren't just those top predators. We have a huge amount of diversity of sharks. Most sharks are actually under 4 feet long. So most sharks are actually small sharks. They're not those big iconic ones we see on National Geographic, even though they are very good for the camera. They like the limelight. What can I say? They're good looking on the camera. But there's a lot of sharks that don't fit into that niche. Most sharks don't fit in that niche. We have the ones that glow. We have the ones that camouflage. And they play different roles in different ecosystems, from coral reefs to seagrass beds to mangroves. And so if we take too many pieces out, it not only affects the ocean food web, but it'll affect these different habitats in really different ways, and usually not good ways, because we need predators to keep everything balanced. Sharks are also important because what they do is they actually feed on other fish, and they feed on their prey, and what they'll do is they're going to go for the easy prey a lot of the time. The ones that are sick, the ones that are slow, which can keep the whole health of the ecosystem good and not potentially spreading disease or spreading a gene that is inefficient and doesn't make them a good fish. And why am I getting into all this? The reason I'm getting into all this is because sharks are unfortunately in deep trouble worldwide. There are a lot of things that are impacting sharks. We can even see here that there's the fish trade, there's pollution. We have the trade of sharks as a tourist commodity. Unfortunately, 100 million sharks on average are killed every year. And that is a lot. That is a lot of sharks that are being taken out of our food web for there to be no impact. And we are seeing in some areas. We have seen that in habitats in which sharks are populous and do well, we see healthier coral reefs. We see less fish disease happen. We see less algae overgrowing coral reef habitats. And so really driving this home and understanding that we are impacting our ecosystems in many ways, and it does impact sharks. Some of the most common reasons for shark numbers decreasing, the top one is overfishing. And some of this overfishing is accidental, well, which is term for that is bycatch, when you catch something accidentally. But some of this fishing is intentional. There are shark fisheries worldwide. And when fisheries are mismanaged or not done correctly, it can result in species numbers decreasing to an unhealthy level. There are other threats for sharks, including climate change, which threatens multiple animals worldwide, the loss and degradation of habitat. So just if you're destroying a mangrove forest, the sharks that maybe use it as a nursery habitat don't have anywhere to go anymore. They don't have anywhere to hide. Pollution is an issue. As we know, that can be an issue from oil. We even did research on how oil spills affect sharks. To quite literally, we found sharks that have had trash in their stomach. And so they feel full even though they're not actually full, and they can starve with trash. That's a common issue for many marine animals, actually. And so before we get into questions, I'm going to leave you with this video where you see a white shark swimming, and as it gets closer, you realize that there are fishing lines wrapped around it. So we have this species, these animals that have survived 400 million years, but we are impacting them in a way that they have never experienced before. And we're doing it on such a total level. And I know that can seem really heavy and really discouraging, but there are things that we can do. One, we can reduce our own plastic usage and waste usage. We can continue to advocate for sharks, which is what I'm doing now and what I hope you guys will take from this. And we can make sure that we eat fish, eat from sustainable fisheries, eat from local fishermen that you know are going out and catch something fresh, and you know it's a local fisherman rather than a giant net that was in the ocean and caught just anything it could. Sharks need your help. All of these different species that you see on the screen, they need your help because worldwide they're not doing great, but there are places in which things are getting better. And a big part of that is because of people like you who care and want to learn and are willing to learn and to speak up for sharks, because sharks don't have a voice. They are fish. They're only so smart. They're fish. So we need to speak for them. One of the things you can do, super easy, is connect with us. Connect with Sharks for Kids. We have Instagram, we have Facebook, we have Twitter, we have TikTok. Our website has free resources, educational materials for yourself, for your friends, for your families, for all ages. And it's all there on our website. You can share it with whoever you want. If you want to even become a member of Sharks for Kids and help talk about sharks, send an email. If you want Sharks for Kids to come into your school, your classrooms, email us. We are happy to talk about sharks with anyone because sharks are cool. And sharing it with you guys is one of the best things that we can do. So that being said, Jennifer, do you have any questions in the chat?
Yeah. Yes. Give me just a second. All right. Thank you so much, Sarah. That was a great presentation. I'm sure folks learned a lot. I learned a lot. Okay, so here's the first question. What got you interested in sharks?
Yeah. So I know this is the webinar for high schoolers today, and I actually was close to your age, and I really solidified what I wanted to do. So I got scuba certified when I was 12, and I was like, okay, I really like this. This is awesome. But around high school, I actually started volunteering at the National Aquarium in Baltimore because I'm from Maryland originally. And I had such a fun time in the shark exhibit, talking about sharks, sharing the knowledge about sharks with people coming into the aquarium, that I realized, I think this is what I want to do. And I was like, okay, I want to really get to understand how these predators impact their ecosystem and what it means in terms of us as humans for sharks to be around. So that's just a little say, like, you're never too young. I started getting passionate about this and sharing this sort of stuff when I was your guys' age, like high school.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks. Okay, the next question is why is it called a mermaid pouch?
That's a good one. I think I'll actually go back to that picture just because it's a great visual. I think people just named it that because for a very long time, I think people thought they were mermaid purses because that was when people believed mermaids existed. And they would wash up on shore, and so people would be like, "Oh, this clearly looks like it held something." It did. It held a baby shark or a baby skate or a baby ray, which I guess is the most beautiful thing of all is these little baby animals. But if you look at them, you see that they kind of have these like tails on either end, kind of like a handbag. Um, and that's just, I think people just call them that because they thought they were little bags for mermaids.
All right. That makes sense. That makes sense. Um, can you go to the slide that has their energy sensors on there?
Yes, I think we're coming up on that actually. This one?
The one that
Oh,
is like under an electron microscope. Yes,
or
or
this one.
the next one. Yes. So within the pores, did you say that these were individual nerves?
Yes, so it's a little bit actually easier to see in the image. So
Okay.
it's these pores that are filled with like a membranous fluid because it has to push against something. And then here at the bottom, it's these nerve receptors. So they will actually like it's inside those pores that are actually feeling and impacting with whatever they are stimulated by. In this case, it's the electrical field that they're detecting.
All right. Thank you.
So that's why
Okay.
if you've ever heard like the punch a shark in its nose, it'll disorient it. Don't do that because I recommend keeping your hand away from shark mouths at all if possible because they are predators. But that is a very sensitive part of their area. And so if you've ever seen those videos of divers or scientists turning a shark over and like touching their snout and moving them, it actually because of that stimulant, it puts them in what's called hypotonic immobility when it's done correctly and done safely by professionals. And similar states can be caused by just turning a shark over onto its back, which we do as scientists all the time. And we can do this to help draw blood, do surgeries, any sort of thing that we need to do with the shark for scientific needs. And it's that sensory stimulus that kind of puts them in a state of like a meditative tonic state.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you. You talked about how there are, is it just one species or a few species that can begin their life in freshwater and while others cannot?
Yes. So it's really just bull sharks that are what we call
Okay.
euryhaline of sharks. I like to describe physiological needs of a shark in a very easy to describe way. All living things have physiological needs. Um, and essentially that's what their body has been designed to be suited for. At any time, you can enter a space that does not match your physiological needs. You just can't necessarily stay there a long time. And the way I describe this is if you walk into a room and the air conditioning is so high that it's 30 degrees Fahrenheit in there, like really cold or 0 degrees Celsius, you can walk in jeans and a t-shirt. You'll just be very uncomfortable and very cold. You're probably not going to stay in there a long time before you start shivering and have to leave or get something to warm up and go somewhere else. Salinity is one of those physiological needs that sharks experience that we don't because there's no salinity in the air. And that other shark species, they might not be comfortable in fresh water, so they won't stay there. They might be able to swim in and out with tides potentially or swim through it. That's why sometimes I've even caught sharks that love salt water in lower salinities, but then I'm like, well, they're gonna leave in like 2 minutes because they're not comfortable here. Bull sharks, on the other hand, they have such a wide range of salinity that they're comfortable in. It's essentially like they can be in a room that's super cold, but they can also be in a room that's warm if we're gonna make it equal with salinity. So bull sharks are very good and very tolerant of fresh water. They are actually able to stay in fresh water and not have it impact their system, and they're okay with it. So they juveniles especially choose to stay in fresh water, and a lot of female bull sharks will pup near estuary systems and or in estuary systems to actually improve the rate of survival. They found that mortality of juvenile bull sharks is lower when they're in the freshwater areas because
Mm,
they don't have to worry about one, bigger sharks, and two, competition from other sharks.
nice. Thank you for that explanation.
Yeah.
All right. Is there a shark that's on your wish list you haven't seen and you've got to
Yeah.
see it?
I really want to see a wobbegong shark. It's those carpet sharks I was showing earlier that really camouflage. I was very lucky that in college I actually got to go to Australia as part of a class, and it was amazing. But I didn't see a wobbegong. I'm not shocked. They're really good at camouflaging. But I would love to see one. They're so cool looking. I think it would be amazing. But is it a cop out to say every shark that I haven't seen is a shark I want to see?
No, I can understand that.
Yeah.
I can understand that. Cool. All right, last question. In your current research, is there a particular species you're focused on?
Yeah. That is a great question. I think that is one of the things that I am so grateful about the research that I focus on. Where I'm doing my research over in the Rookery Bay area in the 10,000 Islands, it's actually what's called a multi-species shark nursery. It's not necessarily something people hear about often. Doesn't mean they don't exist. I just think they're under study. But it's very likely that the area where I'm working is a nursery habitat for multiple shark species. We think that bull sharks, lemon sharks, black-tip sharks, bonnet-head sharks. More research needs to be done to officially like solidify that classification of nursery. But what I can say for sure is that we have juveniles of all four species and also neonates, like really young juveniles throughout time that we have seen there and caught there. So because of how I've structured my research, I'm not species specific because I'm looking at just what's driving their coexistence, how they spend time together, if they spend time together, do they compete? Do they not compete? Do they share resources? Do they choose to hang out in different parts of the estuary? And then I also look at how bigger sharks might be impacting the use of a nursery by these smaller sharks. And so what's really great about my research is that I've had the opportunity to handle both large adult sharks as well as small juvenile sharks. Sometimes in the same day, I'll handle a shark that is only born 2 weeks ago, and then the next hour I'll be pulling in a 12-foot great hammerhead shark and doing research on that one. And it's all answering mind-hold thesis, which has been really cool. So far in Rookery Bay, we know there are 9 different species that do use the estuary waters in some capacity, even if it's just transient. Like I've caught a few tiger sharks. They're probably not hanging out in the estuary, but it's happened enough times that okay, well, they definitely are swimming past. Maybe it's along a route from point A to point B for them. Maybe they know that, hey, this is around pupping season. I might get a chance to try and eat some juvenile sharks. Those are future questions for someone else to study, which would be great. But that is something there. To all this, we have these bonnet-head sharks that love to hang out in those back bays and love to eat all the crabs, shrimp that we have hanging out in our estuary.
Nice. Okay, so I thought of a question while you were talking. I'm interested in, and maybe it's helpful for students as well, is how do you develop or come up with your research topic?
That's a great question. Um, First things first, if you are looking to do research in the future, sometimes you'll come in and there's already a project that's there for you. So a lot of times labs will be like, hey, we already have funding to test XYZ. We just need someone to do the actual testing. And so you can come in that regard. In my case, I developed my project, and one of the things that I was able to do is, and this is what I recommend for all of you guys, read. Read a lot, watch documentaries. A lot of my questions are developed because I read scientific papers and articles that other scientists have published. And I was like, okay, well, they tested this here, but we haven't tested it here and with these types of species. Let's see if we can find similar or different patterns. And or you can look at it and be like, and I also recommend, this is something my advisor says all the time, read science that isn't just about what you're interested in. A lot of the theories that I'm testing and looking at have been done on birds and rodents. And the reason is because it's harder sometimes to study things in aquatic ecosystems. So the foundational knowledge exists somewhere else. And then you can take that and be like, well, we know this theory works for the small rodents. Let's figure out a way to test it in aquatic habitat. So if you are interested in science and you want to develop research questions, one, go and observe, look and see what questions are sparking you, but then read and watch documentaries and see what questions come up. See if a lot of times scientific papers at the end will say, these are future avenues for research, and they'll actually tell you what can be tested next in an area or on a species, which is really nice. It's like a little blueprint for what the future can hold.
Yeah, a little springboard to get your
Exactly.
creative, research minded brain moving forward.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you everyone for joining us. Um, Sharks for Kids has so many resources available, things that can be done with families. If you're planning events for Earth Month, there are things that you could take from Sharks for Kids and do with younger audiences that are in your community. Also, if you're interested in eco schools, that is our sustainability program through the National Wildlife Federation that just structures all the things you want to accomplish around sustainability at your school and within your community. Check us out. But man, I couldn't have asked for a better opportunity to collaborate with Sharks for Kids. And Sarah, thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your expertise.
Thank you so much. This is so much fun. Had a great time, and I'm so glad that we got to talk about sharks today.
Perfect. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.